This story happened about 11 years ago when I was a senior in high school. To this day, it remains the single most mind-boggling thing I've ever experienced. It's also important to note that it took place in mid-December. I'm from Iowa, and winters here get brutally cold at night. The kind of cold where if you get stuck outside, you might not survive. That, combined with the heavy snowfall, makes everything eerily silent. You can hear anything and everything, both inside the house and just outside. My best friend Colton and I were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, spending a boring winter night playing video games. We were the only ones home because my mom had gone from work straight to a bar for drinks with her co-workers. Since it was just the two of us, we thought it would be fun to sneak into the family wine stash and live a little. As we were opening the first bottle, I heard the door to the garage open and then slam shut. Immediately, I panicked. "Oh, crap," I muttered, looking around for a place to hide the bottle. Colton asked, "I thought you said your mom was going to be out all night." "She was," I replied, confused. Then, we heard heavy footsteps followed by my mom yelling, "Anyone home?" I yelled back, "Yep, just hanging out in the basement." I heard a few more steps as they moved from the garage door toward the stairs. Then my mom's voice called out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." Frantically, I kept looking for a good place to stash the wine bottle and shouted back, Yeah, give me just a minute." Then, there was silence for about 20 seconds before her voice came again, this time in a more serious, almost concerned tone. "Anyone down there with you?" That's when the first red flag hit me. Something wasn't right. My family didn't care if I had friends over. Our house was always open to family and friends. And her voice, it sounded like my mom's, but it was off. It was missing something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Feeling uneasy, I shouted back, "Yeah, just Colton." I finally found a spot to hide the bottle and began walking up the stairs. As I climbed, the silence in the house became deafening, and I felt a strange electric tension in the air. Something wasn't right. When I got to the top of the stairs, I looked toward the garage door and the kitchen beside it. The entire area was pitch black. All the lights were off, and no moonlight was coming through the windows. I stepped cautiously into the kitchen, calling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. That electric tension turned into full-blown needles running through my body, and my adrenaline kicked in. I knew I had to get out of the house as fast as possible because my mom wasn't home. I ran back downstairs, grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton asked. "My mom's not home," I said hurriedly, searching for my truck keys. "What do you mean? You were just talking to her." He looked confused, his face filled with disbelief. "There's no one home. We need to leave now," I said firmly. I took a few steps toward the back door that opened into the yard, but then I saw something that made me pause. My dog was shaking on the couch and my cat was growling from behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something bad would happen. "Are we leaving?" Colton asked, still confused. "Number, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out," I replied. I pulled out my phone and called my mom. She picked up immediately. "What's going on?" she asked. "Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me upstairs, but when I went up, you weren't there," I said, my voice shaking. "No," she replied. "I'm just leaving the bar now. I wasn't feeling well. Are you okay? What do you mean you heard me?" I told her the whole story and she rushed home immediately. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she arrived. But before she got there, we could hear something upstairs. It wasn't footsteps or the sound of something moving. It was like a pressure in the air. The only way I can describe it is like a black hole slowly moving from room to room. The word that instinctively came to mind was hungry. When my mom finally got home, we felt it leave, just as suddenly as it had come. It was as if the overbearing, predatory presence had flown away. To this day, we've never figured out what happened. This is just one of many unexplainable things that have happened to us, but it's the easiest to put into words, and one I'm glad to have had a witness for. My mom has since passed away, and I've moved to Arizona. Whenever I visit Iowa and see Colton, he still gets creeped out by what happened that night. I'll probably never truly know what it was. It was mid-January and it had been snowing nonstop. Thankfully, I work from home, so I didn't have to deal with the awful weather too much, aside from quick trips to the grocery store. Some days were brutal, with heavy snowfall and gusts of icy wind. That day, I had back-to-back Zoom meetings for work, but my internet connection was terrible. By 6 p.m., the connection cut out completely, forcing me to call it a night early. The sun had already set, and it was freezing outside. I took my dog Gracie out for a quick bathroom break. The cold was painful and I hurried to get back inside. While I was out there, I noticed someone standing near the road. They weren't doing anything, just standing there. It was strange to see someone outside in this weather, but I didn't think too much of it. Once I got back inside, I dried Gracie's paws and bundled up under some blankets on the couch. I turned on the news for background noise, hoping to catch any updates on the weather. Only a few minutes passed before Gracie perked up. A moment later, she started growling at the front door. I didn't have the curtains open, so I couldn't see outside. I got up to check and saw footprints in the snow on my front patio. There was someone walking back and forth outside. Their tracks zigzagged across the patio, as if they'd been pacing for a few minutes. Then, I saw them walk to the side of the house and disappear from view. It was unsettling, but Gracie eventually relaxed and lay down again. I went back to the couch, keeping an eye on her in case she reacted again. I debated whether to call the police, but nothing had actually happened yet. Around 10 p.m., I took Gracie out one last time. It was even colder and snowier by then, too brutal for anyone to be wandering outside. Afterward, I went upstairs, got ready for bed, and lay down. I'm not sure if I had fallen asleep or was just about to, but I remember opening my eyes to see Gracie standing at the bedroom door. She was staring at it, her head perked up and her tail tucked between her legs. I whispered her name, trying to get her to come to me, but she didn't move. Gracie was always a little nervous around strangers, but she'd never acted like this in our home. I knew something was wrong. I threw off the covers and quietly walked to the door. Putting my ear to it, I listened. Everything was silent. I placed my hand on the doorknob, about to unlock it when it suddenly twisted from the other side. I froze. Someone was trying to open the door. The handle moved slowly at first, then more deliberately. My heart raced as I stood there, barely breathing. I realized they already knew I was in the room, and panic set in. I ran back to the bed, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. At the same time, I searched for something to defend myself with and grabbed a clothing iron from my closet. As I moved around the room, the person outside the door went quiet. They stopped twisting the handle, and I couldn't hear any movement in the hallway. The operator stayed on the line with me as I explained what was happening. I waited for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably about 10 minutes, until the police arrived. When the officers came in, they found no one inside. The front door, however, was wide open, likely picked by whoever had broken in. Snowy boot prints covered the hallways, but nothing was stolen. Whoever it was hadn't come for my belongings, they'd come for me. Unfortunately, the trail ended there. The person was gone, leaving no other clues. To this day, I don't know what would have happened if Gracie hadn't been there to alert me. I don't think I'd be able to sleep at night if not for her watching my back. One winter afternoon, my friends and I went sledding on a massive golf course down the street from us. The huge hills we used were on a few of the course's holes, far away from the main road. It was the perfect day. Light snow fell all afternoon as we snowboarded and sledded on the hills. By the time we decided to head home, it was nearly pitch dark. The light snow that had been falling all day suddenly turned into a fierce snowstorm. It happened fast. One moment, it was a gentle dusting, and the next we were being blasted by thick snowflakes. Within minutes, the ground was covered and visibility became almost non-existent. As we started walking back, the storm intensified, and we realized none of us had a clear sense of direction anymore. Exhaustion was setting in, and it wasn't until the sun fully disappeared that the severity of our situation hit us. Our phones were dead, and we had been walking for what felt like an hour and a half. Still, there was no sign of the road. The storm was relentless, and all we could see around us was snow and trees stretching endlessly into the void. After trudging through the wind and snow, completely drained, we stopped under a massive pine tree to catch our breath. I was more exhausted than I'd ever been in my life. We debated taking a nap under the tree, waiting for the storm to die down so we could get a better sense of direction. But the temperature kept dropping, and we knew stopping for too long could be dangerous. The snow had piled so high that every step felt like wading through deep water. To make matters worse, the sleds we had brought were slowing us down, so we abandoned them under the tree. Every time we paused to rest, the wind stung our faces, and the cold made it harder to think straight. I kept hoping the road was just around the next bend, but it wasn't. It seemed impossible to be lost on a golf course that we had been to so many times before, but the storm made it feel like we were stranded in the middle of nowhere. Our footprints disappeared almost as quickly as we made them, erased by the relentless snowfall. Finally, after what felt like forever, we saw street lamps faintly glowing through the thick curtain of snow. It was like a miracle. We staggered onto the partially plowed road, each step feeling like a victory. The walk home took another few blocks, but eventually, we made it to my friend's house. We were soaked, and our clothes were frozen stiff against our skin. Later, we realized we had been wandering on the golf course for roughly 5 hours. That night, we peeled off our frozen clothes, wrapped ourselves in blankets, and huddled by the fire, trying to warm up. One of my friends even ended up with frostbite on his feet. The next day, it hit me just how close we had come to serious trouble. None of us had any real survival skills, and if we had decided to stay under that tree and take a nap, one of us might not have made it. The storm continued to rage throughout the next day, and we would have been trapped out there much longer. It sounds ridiculous, getting lost on a golf course we'd been to countless times before, but the snowstorm was so blinding that we had no idea where we were going. Our footprints had been completely buried, and it's crazy to think how much we might have walked in circles that night. That experience taught me how quickly things can spiral out of control. One wrong turn or decision, and you could find yourself in a situation you can't escape from. While we weren't in immediate danger of dying, it sure felt like it while we were out there, lost in the snowstorm, as the minutes stretched into hours.